Welcome to the Automation Unplugged podcast, the podcast for technology professionals, featuring leading industry personalities. I'm your host, Ron Callis.
Let's get started.
Hi, everyone, and welcome back. It's another episode of Automation Unplugged, Marketing Experts. I'm your host, Catherine Wheeler, and today we are talking about something that's both exciting and a little bit intimidating, your marketing budget. If you've ever found yourself picking a marketing spend number out of thin air or wondering if you're getting the most out of your investment, you're in the right place. My guest today is somebody who knows exactly how to bring clarity to these questions, Taylor Whipple, our Chief Financial Officer here at One Firefly. Taylor, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much for having me, Kat.
I'm
Great to
excited.
be here.
This is going to be fun. We're going to have a good time today. We're going to talk about money.
Can't wait.
But before we jump in, I want you to introduce yourself to the audience a little bit. Can you share a little bit about your background and where you come from?
For sure. Yeah. So I've actually just celebrated my 12th year yesterday, as a matter of fact, with One Firefly. It's been a heck of a ride, a lot of growth, both personally and professionally during that time. Really grateful and happy to be here. But in my role, so as a CFO of this organization and in some of my prior roles as well, I like to kind of consider myself an operationally and strategically focused CFO. So I try to bring those, that financial and the data side of things and try to help utilize that and convert it to actionable strategies that can produce results. So I've seen firsthand, for example, how unclear budgets, I know we're talking about marketing budgets, and how unclear budgets can waste money versus, let's say, taking a more disciplined approach, discipline/data driven approach, and how that can really help you achieve the goals you're trying to achieve. So excited to have this conversation.
I am too. I think this is really interesting how people, when they're not focused on, their finances, things can get really out of hand really quickly. And we see it a lot with, small business. Okay. Well, happy 12 years at One Firefly.
Thank you.
That is an accomplishment.
It is, I've been very grateful, to be here during this time. I'm very proud of what we've built. We've grown a lot during that time and learned a lot as well. And just excited for the future as well. Just as excited for the next 12 years, I'll say.
I can't wait to see what happens in the next 12 years. I'm thrilled. Okay, so let's zoom out a little bit before we dive into specifically marketing budget. Let's look at marketing kind of holistically.
Sure.
Why do you think it should be such an important piece of the puzzle for AV integrators out there?
Oh, for sure. I think, we hear feedback from many of our customers that, and I think it's just sort of the nature of the industry that we're in, that it's oftentimes can be a feast or famine sales cycle. So we hear from sometimes that, integrators are so busy, they can't get enough people. Then, they might hit a valley where they're not having enough work. Right. And so I think where marketing plays in is that it can help smooth that sort of peaks and valleys and the ups and downs, and helps you have more consistency through the good, through the bad, so that, when things do inevitably take, let's say, a downturn or slowdown, you're in a position to capitalize and you still have lead flow and can, again, try to achieve your goals.
I love that. That's a really good perspective, sort of that not putting all your eggs in one basket, ye old adage.
Absolutely.
Okay. Well, that's a good place to start. And as we kind of dive into this conversation and get a little more into it, I like the games. I like
games too. Let's do this.
All right. We're going to play a game called Cash or Stash. I like alliteration as well. And the goal of this, Taylor, is I'm going to pose some different scenarios for you for marketing opportunities for our fun customers. And you're going to say either cash or stash. So spend that cash or stash that money.
Sounds great. Let's do it.
Here we go. First one up. Paying for a booth at a local home show or design expo, but without a plan to follow up on those leads.
So I'm going to say stash on this one. And it's specifically what you just said on the latter part, which is not having a plan to follow up on those leads. Without a way to kind of capture and then measure that lead quality and the lead flow, it's just brand awareness without a measurable ROI. So definitely a stash.
Okay. Same. On that same vein. Okay. Here's the next one. Upgrading your website to show better photos, videos, clear CTAs or calls to action to help you convert your visitors into leads.
This is like, is there something higher than cash? Like this is going to be like the highest for me, I'd say. I like to say that your website is your sort of 24/7 salesperson. Yeah. So it's out there, it's representing you, your brand, what it is you do. And also it's, by the way, helping you filter out what you don't want as well. So if you're trying to target a specific type of project or specific type of clientele, you can position your imagery, your copy, again, everything to try to sell and present to those specific consumers.
I love it. Yeah, I think self-selection is maybe something people don't think about when they think about a website.
Yes.
How you present yourself really does tell your visitor if they're your customer or not before they even get to you.
Absolutely.
Oh, good call. Okay. Next up, running paid social media ads with precise targeting aimed at homeowners in your service area.
I'm going to say cash on this one, but again, only if it's tracked properly. And also then paired, kind of like we talked about with the first question, paired with a follow-up strategy as well. So you want to make sure you're getting those high quality leads and that you're then have a strategy in place to follow up, to look at those close rates, to know, are they converting? Are they the right type of customer, the right type of projects that are coming in?
Okay. I'm sensing a theme here with you, Taylor. And what I sense this theme to be is what I like to call finishing the drill. And It's not just doing activities to do activities, but to do activities to get to that end goal.
Absolutely. I think, having that end goal in mind is super important. And, a lot of this that we're talking about in terms of marketing strategy is great, but only if it can be paired with, the subsequent actions that need to follow, right? So that's the following up of the leads. It's the measuring of the lead quality, looking at your close rates, for example, if your sales team are attempting to close those leads, like at what stage are they, either proceeding or not proceeding? Are they pushing back on price? Or is it the right type of target? I mean, you could go on and on, but that kind of gives you a glimpse of how to get there and what's possible.
Okay. All right. Here's our next one. Sponsoring community events purely for name recognition. And I feel this is like our like small town companies, maybe, sponsoring that baseball team, getting their name on the back of the logo, being in the outfield on a banner, something like that.
Look, I mean, so I'm going to say stash, but maybe with little asterisks here. Like if it's a nominal amount, right, and you're willing to give back to the community, it's community awareness, you're not expecting much from it, cool. Like maybe it's a cash in that standpoint. But if you're, putting your name out there on the outfield wall, expecting that you're going to get a flow of leads, like I would say that's risky. Without having a way to kind of measure that impact, I wouldn't recommend it in that scenario.
Agreed. Okay. All right. This one I think you're going to like. Working backwards from your annual revenue goals to determine your marketing spend and what tactics to fund.
Now you're speaking my language. Absolutely. I love starting, and I recommend this we practice this here at One Firefly, and I recommend it to all our customers as well. Start with that end goal in mind. Like, what are you trying to achieve? Are you trying to grow? Are you trying to stay the same? And then work backwards from there. And that can obviously, influence everything from cash to, how much you want to equip the sales team and your marketing spend and everything you're going to need to try to hit those goals in place. So this is definitely a cash for me.
You said something really interesting there. And, working back from our goals, we talk to customers a lot. And I think this bears mentioning is that there's no wrong answer, right? Like,
yes.
You don't have to want to grow all the time.
100%. That's right. Yeah. We have customers who are like, they're happy. They've got a business. They're at a size that works for them. Growing just for the sake of growing is, I would say, not recommended. It's not for everybody. There's a lot of stress that comes with growth. Again, we're now an a 6-time Inc. 5000 company. We've had our fair share of growing pains and challenges, right? And so it's not for everybody. And like you said, there's no judgments. But knowing what that target is, it certainly helps you put a strategy together to try to achieve that. And know, are you on track or off track based on what you're trying to achieve?
Yeah. And I think, again, we could go down this rabbit hole for hours, but even knowing that your goal maybe this year is to stay the same while you build up a stronger foundation so that when you do go to grow, some of those growing pains don't hit you as hard and you budgeted for the right things at the right time and have that foundation in place.
Absolutely. I think, as long as you have a strategy in place, that strategy, you can allow for some flexibility. If things don't go, right the whole time, by the way, they normally don't, right? We saw that, for example, in the first quarter of this year when everybody was hit with tariffs. Well, guess what happened to our strategy that we had, all put together in Q4 of last year? Like, it went out the window, right? So but it at least still gives you a framework in which to kind of, position yourself from a strategy standpoint. And, you can, again, remain nimble, agile to try to pivot where and when needed.
Okay. All right. Again, we won't belabor it. We could rabbit hole this one all day, but our final game question today is social media. So boosting social media posts just because they got more likes than usual.
I would say that's a stash in my mind. That's something I would not recommend. Vanity metrics don't pay the bills. It might look great. Oh, I've got 1 million likes. Awesome. How many leads did you get? How many are you, how are you doing in terms of sales and your ability to, achieve those goals? So I would say stash on this one.
Okay, circle back on that, because I don't know if vanity metrics is a term that everybody knows. Can you kind of let our audience understand what a vanity metric is?
Yeah, so a vanity metric is essentially something that sounds really good on paper. So that might be that example I gave of, hey, I have 1 million likes. I'm number one for this very specific search term. Well, and that's great, by the way, but only if it also is accompanied with that lead flow that you need and the sales that you need to try to achieve those goals. If it's just great for the sake of being great, well, then it's potentially money that could be, reallocated somewhere to, again, help you have a more or a better outcome, I'll say, from a sales standpoint.
Okay. Yeah, makes sense. Okay. I lied to you, Taylor. That wasn't our last question. I did want to hit on one more. Specifically around specifiers, because that is, obviously a good resource for all of our customers out there and working with specifiers. So is partnering with interior designers, co-branded brochures or video, showing, technology with design as they like to see it, is that a cash or stash?
That's a cash for me, for sure. I mean, we know this industry, our industry, we live on referrals. Customers live on referrals, and having a referral pipeline and having partners who can help feed you with those referrals, that's going to be invaluable. So I'm all for that.
I love it. Thank you. Well, this was fantastic. I appreciate you playing along and playing a little game with me. And I think we kind of touched on a lot of scenarios and real life things that happen to our dealers out there or things they think about. So it's a good place for us to start our conversation today.
Love it.
All right. So start with we'll go back into the big picture. And we talked about why marketing matters. So why is a marketing budget a crucial part of a strategy for AV integrators, especially those, focused on residential customers?
Yeah. So, I think we talked about it towards the earlier part of the conversation. We know that, many integrators have revenues that can often be lumpy. It's a lot of it, what they're dealing with is project-based. There's some seasonality to that as well, right? And so you are often, not always, but often in these sort of feast or famine cycles where, you might be too busy all of a sudden. And then, some months later, you're trying to find those projects to keep, everyone that you have on staff billable as possible. So what that marketing budget essentially does is gives you a framework to help with consistency, consistency of leads, consistency of project flow. So that's the sort of the name of the game. Again, going back to helping you achieve your goals and what those growth goals are, or not growth goals. Maybe it's just staying the same. Whatever it is, your goal is your goal. The marketing budget, it's can help you get there.
I love that. Yeah, I appreciate that, because I think you're right. We have weird sales cycles and weird project cycles depending upon the specific project. So trying to make sure your business is stable, over time. We're not retail, right? It's all custom.
Exactly.
Okay. So do you, and I know people hear the word budget, like I hear budget as a just a person, not as a business owner. And I hear you can't spend any money, Kat. So do you see budgets as like restrictions, like guardrails out there? or more like a roadmap that gives you freedom to actually spend more and spend smarter?
I think it's the latter, honestly. I think there's a framework in place that allows you to allocate funds where and as needed. And you may find, for example, that some things that you did last year, for example, that worked really well for marketing, and you want to spend that this year. Well, it may not necessarily produce that same results as it did last year, right? So ideally speaking, within that budget, you want to have some degree of flexibility to reallocate funds if something is not working or is not being as effective as you'd like, or it was last year, for example. We could reallocate those funds to try something different. It would be amazing if we could all just know exactly, we're going to spend this money, we're going to get this return, it's going to happen every single time, but that's just not the reality of the world we live in. It's ever changing. There's technology, AI, you name it. So, you constantly have to kind of test and measure, and you do want to see and find out what works and what doesn't work. But at least having a budget in place, knowing how much to spend and when, the very basics, that's going to help you, again, go back to achieving your goals and being successful.
And be able to make decisions, right? Make decisions.
Exactly.
Because you know what you're working with. It's not, well, if I do this, is it too much? Is it too little?
It goes back to kind of, pairing we all have sort of the premonitions and the feelings of it. I feel like the phone's not ringing as much. I feel like this isn't working as well. That's great. But let's just pair that with some data and some, actionable, more objective based metrics. And when you pair those two together, you're going to have a strategy that's going to help you be more successful.
I think that's super smart. I know I talk to dealers a lot, turns out. And I, was talking to somebody about close rate the other day, and their different business channels, and they thought, one was more successful than the other. And then we went and actually really looked at what was closing and what wasn't, and they were completely wrong. Yes. And so, I think you're right. Having a feeling is much different than having actionable data that you can test, measure, and, act upon.
Absolutely.
Okay. Well, let's do something to help our guys out there. Let's walk these integrators through the process. So if somebody has never built a formal marketing budget, bless your heart, how and where should they start?
So for me, I think it starts with going to what is your goal? And I would start with revenue, right? So let's look at next year's revenue, for example. Where do you want to be? Are you trying to grow? Are you trying to stay the same? And then we can kind of work backwards from there. Oftentimes we can look at something as simple as a percentage of revenue. Hey, I'm going to allocate, if I'm trying to hit 3 million, I'm going to allocate, let's say 5 to 8%. And that's going to be my marketing budget. And that's going to help support the sales that I need in order to realize those revenue goals. Mm-hmm. From there, though, you also have to look at what's your average project size, right? What's your close rate? We talked about, again, accompanying the strategy and the actions that follow the marketing, specifically on the sales side, that's going to be necessary to kind of help close the loop and help you achieve these goals. So knowing your cost per lead also super helpful. If someone's calling in, for example, and is interested, ask them, how did they hear about you guys? It sounds very simple and basic, but it's in reality, it's not something that we do or our customers do consistently. Mm-hmm. And if they did, they'd be, certainly in a position to be more successful. And then again, kind of going back to focusing on what works. Again, with the knowledge that what you did last year from a marketing standpoint may not necessarily be what's going to work this year. Or, what Ron always says, at our CEO, he says what, has gotten you here will not necessarily get you there, right? And so the same principle applies as it relates to marketing and budgeting as well.
I think you said some stuff that's really interesting in that I think a lot of our dealers maybe either don't pay attention to or don't pay enough attention to, which is, thinking about the types of projects they're doing, what their resources allow them to do. If you only have so many guys, you can only do so many jobs a year. And if those jobs are X size, are we marketing for more of those jobs? Or are we trying to get little jobs to fill them in? What are we doing? And how does that affect that revenue?
100%. Yeah. I mean, I think it all goes back to, so we talked about like defining, the revenue targets that you want, but certainly you could go beyond that and say, well, of that 3 or 4 million or whatever I'm trying to achieve, how do I want that to be comprised? Do I want 1 million, little jobs and I'm doing, mounting TVs and hanging TVs, things of that nature, or do I want to do the more higher end stuff and do fewer of that? And just knowing what you want to achieve, you can work backwards to get there. So if your goal is to, I only want high-end projects, great. We can start looking at how can we market to those type of consumers who are looking for those type of projects, and not the people who are, need help hanging their TV or mounting their TV, et cetera.
Yeah. And again, no judgment, whatever.
Right. There's zero right and wrong. There's something for everybody out there, for sure.
And there's a tactic for everything out there, right? And there's ways to get those people. Okay. Well, that's really great advice, because I don't think that's something people think about enough, maybe. And I'm guessing this all ties back into, knowing your numbers, as we've kind of talked about, but average customer value may be something interesting that our customers don't think about either.
Absolutely. It's something we've tried to practice more and more here at One Firefly, right? And looking at, especially if you're offering any sort of service plan or you have any recurring revenue coming in, knowing how long your customers are staying with you, what are they paying you over the lifetime, right? Whether that's project, by the way, or recurring, it doesn't really matter. Knowing what to expect, that can help you work backwards to see, like, from an ROI perspective and the cost per lead, to try to help you, again, make those decisions that you're going to need to achieve those goals.
And I mean, in a similar vein, those existing customers, you want to boost that lifetime value. They're your easiest people to sell more stuff to.
Absolutely. It's far more expensive to go out and acquire a new customer than it is to sell to an existing customer. So again, if you track it and you're measuring it, you can change it. Right. So maybe we should.
Here's the quote, Taylor.
I see the quote right now under the little caption. Yeah. But and that's something that's a principle, by the way, that we've practiced here as a leadership team at One Firefly. If we start seeing something that we want to improve, then we track and measure that over, whatever period, weekly, monthly, quarterly. And we can then take the actions and the tactics necessary to try to make those better. So in that case, if it's improving our average spend per customer or customer lifetime value, we can track it over time and see, hey, how are we doing? Is what we're doing working to try to move those numbers up?
Well, and I love that, because I think it leans into the message that marketing isn't only for new customers, it's also for your existing customers. And it's something people forget. And we're a referral-based industry.
Absolutely. Yeah. Especially with the rate, I think the technology is changing as well. And you might not think about the customer that you sold, 3 or 4 years ago, but they may be in a position where they're ready to upgrade, and that could be pretty sizable, and that could be potentially very lucrative.
Well, and there are also people that move a lot. These are second home people, and people that upgrade their homes and build new ones. So yeah, those relationships are just as valuable as new ones, or if not more so.
Definitely.
Okay. So we know why, we know how, we know what we need to measure. We've got some steps now. Do you recommend, when you're putting together a budget, a certain percentage of your revenue? We talked about, building it backwards. Does that percentage shift? If you want to grow, if you want to just maintain, like, what's the benchmark there?
Yeah, for sure. So I think if you're wanting to grow, anywhere from 8 to 12%, again, we could say, to what degree do you want to grow? I want to grow 1%. Okay. Well, that might differ than I want to double my business, right? So it's a sliding scale.
Yeah.
But let's just say growth in general. Let's say anywhere between 8% and 12% of your total revenue should be spent on marketing related activities. Not all on one thing, right? That could be many different things that encompass that, many different strategies and tactics that would encompass that marketing spend. But if you're just wanting to, let's say, stay steady state, anywhere from 5 to 8%. I mean, we have, some customers or folks that we've spoken with have been actively spending less than 1%. So I think a good next step is, like, how much are you spending? Just like, what is that current number right now? And then we can kind of work backwards from your goal of what you're trying to achieve and see what might be effective.
Well, I think you mentioned something interesting in there too, is that there are things that are in your marketing budget as a business that you might not consider, like your branded shirts, your vehicle wraps, your
Yes.
business, like all of that is in part of that marketing spend. So we're not just
Right.
talking about websites and digital
It's not
marketing.
just ad spends, not just social media, anything like that, right? And another differentiating factor is too, like, are you trying to, we talk about growth in terms of revenue growth, but if you're trying to break into, let's say, a new type of market or a new category, like if you've been doing smaller jobs, but you really want to just get that sort of upper echelon, that higher tier, you might have to spend more, regardless of whether your revenue is going to grow. It may take more budget in order to try to reach that different type of consumer.
No, that's actually really interesting. I hadn't thought about it that way. I've learned something today. Although we've also gotten a very nice clip, so I'm pleased. Okay. So we've gotten all the places, we've built the budget, we've got our steps, we're working backwards, we've got our goals. Now, how do we make sure it's actually working? I know we've said test and measure a lot, but
Yeah.
should these integrators look for when they're tracking to know that they're getting a return on their investment?
Well, I think one of the major keys is just to have an infrastructure in place to be able to track and measure that data, right? So you want to, again, whether you're doing it yourself or you're working with an agency, try to see what's working from a lead standpoint. What's your cost per lead? Again, looking at your close rates, things of that nature. By the way, if you don't have a CRM, and I realize that not all customers do, you can track it in other ways. I mean, there was a day and time where One Firefly in our early days did not have a CRM. We were using, Excel and Google Sheets and things like that.
Hey,
And that can get the job done, right, to a certain degree. The point is that you want to have something in place to help you track that, because it kind of like going back to our earlier part of our conversation, if you measure it and track it, you can change it. So just make sure that you have that infrastructure in place to be able to change it. So that way that when we do allocate those funds, we can start looking at the aforementioned, metrics to see if it's working. That's the challenge. Marketing is always changing. The world is changing. Technology is changing. So again, what worked last year is not necessarily going to work this year. So we want to be able to track it so that we can put more funds with what is working and is effective and less where it's not.
What I'm hearing, Taylor, is data, not vibes.
Oh, I think you talk about quotes. There we go.
Quote forever.
Yes.
Because I think you hit on something really, really powerful earlier when you said, I feel like the phone's not ringing, or I feel like we're too busy, or if we're too busy, does that mean we're not making money, or are we making money? I don't know. And if we are making money, are we reinvesting that? What are we doing as a business to level up, or, reinvest or not, or like, how do you know?
I totally agree. And look, I can also recognize that it may, there may be some people listening out there who might be sort of like, well, that sounds great, but man, that sounds like such a lift to be able to put everything in place to track this. And the reality is, in some cases, it can be a little bit harder at first before it gets easier. But I can promise you, once even some of the basics are set up, life is going to get so much easier in terms of being able to make those decisions that, again, are going to have a better impact for you and your business.
Okay. And we've talked a little bit today about, testing, measuring, tracking. Things don't work sometimes like they did before, and the world changes, etc. So if something is underperforming, how do you decide whether to tweak it or just scrap it?
Yeah, I mean, I think it probably depends on the degree of which it's underperforming, right? Certainly I would recommend not going back to the data, not making rash decisions. Like if I'm getting less leads than I was through a specific channel last year, for example, I'm not going to just be like, oh, cancel it. It's done. I'm going to say, well, what could we change about it? Is it the copy? Is it the creative? Is it the imagery? What was, something that was working, it's not working. What could be changed or tweaked? That would be great, because if we can tweak those things and get those results to be more sustainable, then that's great. But if not, if it's purely not working, we're trying something, it's just not happening, then absolutely. And the data is also validating that, then cut it and reallocate those funds. I guess that'd be one of my major takeaways. Like, don't just try something and say, and you don't get results and say, all right, well, then I'm not going to just do marketing, or I'm going to cut my marketing budget, right? No, it just means that that component or that aspect of marketing that you were trying, wasn't as effective. So there's a million other different strategies and ways and tactics that could be deployed that might lead to much better outcomes. And so a lot of this, you mentioned, Kat, is about testing and measuring. If we all knew like the one strategy that was going to work for everybody, I think we'd all be,
we'd all be rich
on beaches and yeah, having yachts right now. But
if only there was that magic pill.
Right.
If we found that, somebody let me know. Okay. Well, you said something interesting in there. And I think as we come towards the end of our conversation, you mentioned one takeaway, but if you could give me some like rapid fire takeaways for our listeners out there, practical things that these integrators can do right now, this quarter, to make their marketing budgets more effective.
Yeah, for sure. So I'd say, start with your goal in mind. I think it's not too early to start thinking about next year. I mean, it's crazy to think it's already mid-August. It's that's nuts. So next year is going to be here before we know it. And so it's not too early to start planning next year and putting those targets on the board and then working backwards from that. All right, if I want to do the X number next year, what should I be spending? And, looking at those different strategies, start to look at your framework. Are you in a position to be able to measure whether these things are effective or not? These strategies are effective. What's your cost per lead? What's your close rate for sales? Some of these metrics are going to help you make better decisions. And then, make sure your CRM is optimized. If you don't have a CRM, have something in place that can at least track things in a way that can help you make these decisions. And then, finally, I mean, I kind of mentioned it, I think, on our cash or stash question, but, I mentioned the website. I love the idea of having something that's representing you and your brand out there in a very polished way. Maybe that's your website. Hopefully it is, but there are other opportunities to do that through other, that could be a case study, let's say with a design partner or, brochure or something that is conveying the type of experience that you're bringing and the value that you're bringing to your clients.
I love that, because I think we all know as human beings, short attention spans, perception is reality. What people see is what they believe and what they remember. So yeah, having a high value asset out there that represents you really well is important.
Well said.
Well, this has been incredibly valuable, especially for me. I'm not a business owner, but I talk to dealers a lot, and I know they struggle with what their business structure is, and if they're doing it right, if they're doing it wrong, how do we know? And just, I think hearing a little bit from you and your experience is going to be really, really good for them. So thank you so much for sharing your expertise today.
My pleasure. Thanks for having me.
I loved it. So, okay, before we go though, I do want you to do one more thing before I let you get back to your life. What is the single best piece of advice that you would give an integrator?
If I could only pick one, oh man.
One.
I would probably say that I would not treat marketing as an expense to minimize, but rather looking at it as an investment, right? So if you're looking at your P&L, you don't want to say like, well, if I could cut marketing in half, I'd have even more profit, right? Like that's not a recommended strategy, I would say. This is something that is going to help fuel and sustain, and ideally, if you're trying to achieve that, grow your business over time, help you avoid those peaks and valleys that we talked about, and just have you be more successful in all. So yeah, treat it as an investment, not an expense.
Couldn't agree more. Okay, well, thank you, Taylor. I will let you get on back to your day. And thank you, audience, for listening to us again here at Automation Unplugged. If you enjoyed today's episode, don't forget to like, subscribe, and join us for our next conversation.